Deception in Miami from the Esmeralda King series of books by Kathryn Louise. Chapter 1: The Funeral. Would it be inappropriate for me to light a cigarette right now, right here, amongst everyone? I thought to myself as I watched the coffin slowly lower into its final resting place. Smoking was the only way to settle my nerves, but I knew deep down that it wasn't the right moment. I stood as far back as I could from the most stunning silver metal casket I'd ever seen, sprawled with white calla lilies and the image of a man I had never met before. Now, I'm no expert on coffins, but it looked extremely expensive. In fact, I knew it was expensive. This was the funeral of Michael Richardson, the son of Arthur, a multi-millionaire. The sound of distraught tears, heart-wrenching emotion, and sobbing filled the air like a painful storm was brewing. Usually, funerals meant closure, an end to any pain and suffering, but in this instance, it wasn't the end, not by a long stretch. This was just the beginning of a complicated and dramatic family feud. So is this what a millionaire's funeral really looks like? Michael was only 50 years old, far too young to be lying in a metal box, about to be buried under 6 feet of earth. I still couldn't quite get my head around death, especially when they were taken too soon. Why had I been called to solve the mystery behind someone's supposedly innocent death? Why did someone think it was under suspicious circumstances? I counted the amount of Rolexes peering out from the sleeves of most of the men's suits, and the Gucci, Prada, and Versace sunglasses on every woman's face, even though the sun wasn't shining. Limousines and fancy cars lined the side of the road next to the graveyard like a prestigious car showroom. I had only ever been to a cremation before and not a burial, so this was new to me. I began wondering how many people would show up to my own funeral. Would I be missed? Would the attendees be sad? I had spent so much time working recently that I had lost contact with a lot of friends and rarely saw my family. So maybe I wouldn't be missed that much after all. The sky was dark and cloudy, the rain was heavy and falling in such a way that my black umbrella was doing very little to keep me dry. My dark tights and mid-length skirt were damp and stuck to the back of my legs. There was a chilling feeling that lingered in the air as if something was wrong. The hairs on my arms and down my back stood on end. I could feel the tension lingering like a bad smell. Edging slowly towards the large, shadowing oak tree to the side, I stood, watching patiently for the service to finish. Despite me not knowing anyone there and attending a stranger's funeral, something felt oddly familiar. I glanced around at the gathering of people, all there to say their last goodbye, hoping something or someone would stand out. One by one, I studied the faces of his nearest and dearest. I had so many questions swirling through my mind. Are they genuinely mourning? Are some of them glad to see the last of him? Did he have any enemies? Is anyone missing? Was there really anything peculiar in the way he had died? These were all the pieces of the puzzle that I had to pull together. I watched every moment like a hawk. I studied the eye contact between the mourners and their body language, piecing together relationships between the small crowd as the funeral celebrant finished reading the Lord's Prayer. He paused, hung his head out to respect the deceased, and closed his eyes, leaving an eerie silence. The only sound that could be heard were the two large crows perched above me. They were squawking to each other and had flown in midway through the service, out of the pouring rain, and sat like two old men looking on, occasionally putting the world to right. A small speaker balanced precariously on a stand next to the coffin began playing Have I Told You Lately That I Love You by Rod Stewart. The steady beat and his soothing monotone voice caused yet another wave of tears and emotion from those around me. There was something about funerals, even if you didn't know the person being buried, that brought back a flurry of sadness from memories of other funerals you'd been to. Remembering those that I had lost, I felt a lump in my throat and my eyes started to water. Snap out of it, Esmeralda, I thought to myself. You can't be a blubbering fool today. You need to be alert and aware of your surroundings. After all, you are here on official business. But at the same time, I didn't want to stand out from the crowd. Diving into my pocket, I reached for a tissue that I had strategically placed there that morning and wiped my eyes, being careful not to smear mascara and blinking to reset my feelings. I pushed my glasses back up into place from the bridge of my nose and took a deep breath. Now that the casket was firmly inside the burial hole in the ground, the music began to fade. One by one, the mourners threw dark red roses on top of the casket before turning and making their way back to their cars, clutching nothing but the order of service cards that had been handed out at the beginning. A few hugs were given, but it felt like emotion was fairly distant from them as a family. I did the same, making my way back to my car that I had parked in the most askew way, in the only space I could find. I couldn't have cared less. I was late, and the only thing that mattered was getting to the funeral without drawing attention to myself. Immediately after I got in, the windows began to steam up. So I launched my soaking wet umbrella into the footwell of the passenger side and turned the heaters on full. Ugh, this weather sucks, I said to myself, looking in the rearview mirror to check my appearance. I need some sunshine. My pale face was staring back at me. Well, there's no chance of that now that I have taken on this case. Any type of holiday will have to wait until further notice. Reading the address for the wake venue from the order of the service, I quickly entered London Road, GU195EU, into the sat-nav, flicking the car into drive as quickly as I could, as I didn't want to be left behind, setting off along the small track behind two curtains of graveyards on either side of me. I couldn't help but notice the sheer beauty of this place. Brookwood Cemetery was stunning, set in what looked like acres of beautifully landscaped gardens and memorials. I would never be able to afford a burial of this scale and magnitude. I wasn't important enough. But what would matter if you were dead anyway? I guess it all boiled down to the status for some people. I followed the winding driveway along to the large iron gates that stood at the entrance, the last car in a long line of vehicles belonging to the Richardson family and friends. We all drove slowly for about 7 miles through the beautiful Surrey countryside, taking in the rolling scenery as we went, while the cars on the other side of the road slowed to watch the procession passing in the opposite direction. I must admit it was quite impressive, similar to what I would imagine it would be to follow someone famous. Finally, we reached a turning in the road, a curved 10-foot high brick wall, and another set of iron gates, just as majestic as the last. A large black sign with elegant white and gold letters read, Penny Hill Park, Hotel, Restaurant and Spa. I had never been to the venue before, but I could see why they chose it. The impressive winding driveway and main house with its elegant grandeur came into full view as I pulled into the main car park, lined with the tallest fir trees, swaying gently in the breeze. This was the type of place you would hold a royal wedding. Pulling in alongside a brand new black Bentley Continental GT, I tried to play it calm. I needed to fit in amongst the wealth and the guests arriving. My white sports coupe didn't stand out like a sore thumb, but it wasn't at the same level as some of the cars that were there. Scrabbling for my handbag on the seat next to me, I pulled out a compact mirror and pretended to adjust my hair and glasses. I couldn't see through the black tinted windows of the Bentley, but I kept one eye on my reflection and the other on the car next to me. The Bentley car door swung open. At first, I saw a finely tailored black leather shoe step onto the tarmac, followed by a suited leg. Then a muscular and well-manicured hand grabbed the outside of the door as he got out of the car. I tried not to look, but I couldn't avoid making contact with him. I almost dropped the compact down the side of the chair in a panic, trying to regain all my composure. I flipped it shut, stuffed it back in my bag, and rustled around for a lipstick instead. He was attractive. He was very attractive. But who was he? I had to find out. His short black hair was combed back into a male model type style, and his dark, luscious eyes were alluring and matched his well-groomed facial hair. As he looked briefly into my car, our eyes met and he smiled cautiously. I tried to return the smile, but no sooner had I placed the lipstick back in my bag and unclipped my seatbelt, he had already shut the car door and was making his way across the vast parking area, down the steps to the grand walkway, and out of sight. My heart was pumping, and the nervousness was kicking in as I thought of the awkwardness ahead of me. Attending a funeral wake where I needed to be hidden, conspicuous, and blend in, but at the same time ask as many questions as I could. I was on my own. Maybe I should have come with Amy or Casey or perhaps one of the others, but there wasn't the time. I switched off the engine and opened the door, hurling my handbag over my shoulder. It wasn't easy walking in high heels, but I did my best to lock the car and look elegant as I did so, walking in the same direction as everyone else. The main entrance of the venue took me to a sloping archway. A series of paved steps to one side made it easier for me to keep up the pace of others. A large oak-built pergola stood above me. Vines and pretty climbers swirled around me and clung to the timbers as I looked up, admiring its beauty like something out of a secret garden, before passing underneath and out the other side. I did my best to keep walking, but I couldn't help stopping occasionally to appreciate the quaintness of the hotel as I approached a large cobbled courtyard. I looked around and noticed that no one else was impressed by the graciousness of this 19th century building or the way that it seemed so picturesque that it deserved a picture or two. But that was me all over. Everywhere I went, I would notice every intricate detail of my surroundings, every sight, sound, smell, aware of everything and everyone around me like a hawk. I guess that's why I'm good at doing what I do. I left no stone unturned and nothing passed me without being noticed. Or so I thought. I joined the short queue of people by the main doors. There was a metal freestanding sign saying Richardson Wake and an arrow pointing to the left. A small projector above the door beamed the letters Penny Hill Park and their stag emblem onto the large mat on the floor. I paused, waiting for the front desk attendant to wave us in. He looked bemused and fraught. I imagine that it was from having to deal with the wake attendees. They didn't appear to be the easiest people in the world to please. Finally, he held up his arm, ushering us into the building and in the same direction as the sign was pointing. I smiled appreciatively as I passed, but he seemed preoccupied. Even more beautiful than outside, the hotel's interior was lined with stone flooring, chandeliers bigger than I had ever seen before, and a mixture of furniture and ornaments that looked extremely old and expensive and the type you would see in a royal castle. I followed the others until I heard the sound of someone clearing their throat behind me, louder than normal as if trying to grab my attention, and it did. Turning around suddenly, a rather pretty blonde-haired middle-aged woman placed her hand over her mouth and apologized. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just getting over a cold, and what with the emotion of the funeral as well as the past few weeks, it's made my throat terribly dry." Coughing into her hand, she smiled endearingly. "It's okay. I trailed off, trying to find an excuse as to why I turned around so abruptly. How rude of me. I'm Emily Carter, and you are—" She held out a petite hand to shake mine and introduced herself. "Oh," I said, a little surprised. "My name is Esmeralda King." I looked deep into her bluey green eyes. Her hands were cold, but she gave a firm and powerful handshake. The ends of her wavy, mousy brown hair rested gently on her shoulders as we both stood for a moment in an awkward silence. Neither one of us spoke, but I knew exactly who she was and how she was related to Michael and Arthur. I wondered what she was thinking and if she knew who I really was. Emily Carter was the previous legal advisor to Arthur Richardson and his business until he passed late last year. Then, when his son Michael Richardson took over the company, she began working for him instead. I was told that Michael had drowned whilst at sea, sailing with his son Oscar. His body was recovered hours later. Oscar was the last one to see him before he died, but there was nothing on the police report to say that there was any connection to his death or anything that would relate to foul play. Just as I was about to ask more questions, I caught a quick glimpse of the man who stepped out of the Bentley next door to me about half an hour earlier. He passed us in the corridor, walking in the opposite direction. I followed his casual, swaggering walk to the gents' toilets, but he stopped, looked back, slyly smiled, then turned and continued. Who on earth is he? It was almost as if he wanted to draw attention to himself. The smile, the stop and turn, and the way his eyes almost had a message in them to follow him. I blinked, trying to bring myself back to the conversation with Emily instead of watching his stranger and being drawn in. Poor Michael. Devastating it was, and at such a young age. We became so close after Arthur, you know. Her voice trailed off. I'm sorry, I shook my head at her as if to apologize for not really listening. Were you very close to Arthur and Michael? I asked, but maybe I shouldn't have. I was prying just a little too much, but I needed to know. I had to find out as much as I could before leaving. I loved Arthur so very much. I know everyone in the family talked about us. They disagreed with our relationship and there being such an age gap. But to us, it didn't matter. He was so young and adventurous at heart. Her eyes looked genuinely pained as tears began to swell, giving them an almost glass-like appearance. She held up a silk handkerchief, sniffed, and gently dabbed the corner of her eyes in turn. I'm so sorry for your loss. I didn't She stopped me instantly before I could ask another question. And not to mention the trauma of having to leave our home without anywhere else to go. It was humiliating to say the least. I lost everything when I lost him. After Lillian passed away, I think he was lonely. He wanted company just as much as I did. I don't think people understood our needs. No sooner has she started to pour her heart out to me, a complete stranger, might I add, the extremely attractive man appeared from behind, placing his hands on the shoulder of her elegant satin blouse and startled her. She stopped instantly and froze. I do apologise, Miss, He stopped, waiting for me to add my name. King, Esmeralda King, I replied. Nice to meet you, Miss King. However, Miss Carter gets a little too overwhelmed from time to time, and we are just about to raise a toast to my late father in the dining room, if you would care to join us. He walked around to join Emily on her side and looked at her out the corner of his eye. She quickly blinked a couple of times as if to acknowledge his hushing commands and briefly nodded. Yes, that's right. We need to raise a toast to Michael. Lovely talking to you, Esmeralda. She smiled, but I could see there was more to her story, more than he was prepared for her to divulge. Likewise, lovely to meet you both. I smiled back as they began following the crowds of others, leaving the main reception and heading to the dining room. There must have been over 100 people at the wake. Some of the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to present themselves to me one by one. If his late father was Michael, then the most attractive man I had seen in a long time must be Oscar. Why did I not notice the resemblance between him and the picture of the man from the coffin? He must take after his mother, who I was yet to meet. But what was the relationship between Oscar and Emily? Or maybe there wasn't a connection at all. She was just the legal representative of the business, and that was that. If she had been asked to vacate their family home, where was she living now, and who was in the family home? Maybe it had been sold after he died. I guessed that Lillian was Arthur's wife. Mental note: Emily Carter, the legal representative for the Richardsons' corporate empire, was in a relationship with Arthur, the head of the family, and they didn't like it. Oscar was the son of Michael, whose funeral I was at. I had to meet more of the family and piece this all together. I followed the sound of Cannon by Johann Pachelbel being played as I joined the gathering of people in the main dining room. In the corner, to the side of the glass-walled bar, was a shiny black grand piano and a well-dressed man in a black suit and bow tie perched on the edge of a matching stool. The way he played the piano was breathtaking. The chords echoed around the walls as everyone stood watching him. Three young barmaids dressed in white skirts and short, tight black skirts weaved in and out of the guests, carrying silver trays full of champagne. Chink, chink. The sound of a metal knife rapped against the side of a glass and suddenly stopped the quiet chatter as well as the piano. It instantly grabbed everyone's attention as all eyes became locked on Oscar Richardson. He stood above us on a wooden stage placed in the corner of the room. There was silence. He cleared his throat as he scanned the audience of the room. Firstly, I want to thank you all for coming today. Again, he stopped and breathed. Oscar appeared to be choked, struggling to say the words he wanted to. His eyes seemed to pause as soon as they reached mine, just as they had done in the car park. I looked around, hoping that it was just a focus point for him, but I couldn't help but feel awkward. I shifted from one foot to the other. My high heels were already making my feet throb from standing up there too long, but I kept calm, hoping he would move on to his next victim. He didn't. His dark, empty stare locked on me. Secondly, I want to raise a toast to my beloved father. There was a slight pause as he held up the slim, sparkling glass in his hand and continued, who I will miss dearly. He was loved by everyone. It's endearing to see so many of you here today. He inspired me to be a better man, to love, to care, and most importantly, to be the person I am today. I will be forever in his debt. Although I wanted to believe Oscar and his sad, short words as a grieving son, there was something that wasn't sitting right. To Michael, Oscar lifted his glass even further into the air before drawing it to his lips and taking a sip. The whole room did the same. To Michael, echoed around the walls and was followed by the sound of people sipping, then applause. I copied, trying to blend into the others like a shadow on the wall. To Michael, I murmured under my breath while carefully watching everyone around me. You must be Esmeralda King. I felt a hand on my shoulder that made me jump. Turning around to find the owner of a hand was a middle-aged greying man. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you jump. I just thought I would introduce myself to you as you were standing here all alone. He smiled politely at me, waiting for my response. Uh, yes, I'm Esmeralda King. How did you know? My eyes narrowed. And you are? Samuel Richardson, Michael's brother. He held out his hand for me to formally shake. I accepted, noting that his hands were large and warm, wrapping around mine and almost twice in size. A very expensive-looking wedding ring was embedded tightly around his fourth finger. It was a thick and shiny metal band that appeared to have a hole in the middle, almost as if something was missing. A diamond, perhaps? Or a gem of some description. I quickly moved my eyes back to his. Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. My thoughts are with you and your family. I gave my condolences as our handshake was still in progress. Yes, it was a big shock to the whole family. We all knew he had taken on such a responsibility. It obviously became too much for him. He'll be sorely missed. I retracted my hand and left it hanging awkwardly by my side. Too much for him? I questioned. Yes, you honestly believe he drowned on his own sailing boat? Michael was a competent sailor. He won multiple competitions and was used to the conditions of the open sea. He... Samuel gave me a puzzled look. I can't imagine the grief your family are going through right now, especially after losing your father less than a year ago. Too? My lips pursed together. I didn't want to say too much, but I was hoping he would give me a little more information on the family history than he was currently providing. May I ask how you are acquainted with my brother? He wasn't giving anything away. Instead, he fired another question at me. I worked for your brother for a short while. My quick response was an attempt to shut him down, but he wanted more. Oh, really? What do you do? His head tilted as he looked interested. A project manager. I was in the acquisitions team. Poor Oscar to have found his father in such a way and then be able to take care of the speeches at his wake. He must be a very strong man. I wanted to know more. I wouldn't worry about Oscar. He is more than capable of looking after himself. They weren't overly close. He is more like his mother in that sense. Samuel seemed to change his home. Ah, that's a shame. But at least he has his mother's support, I guess, especially on a day like today. I edged a little closer to him, hoping he would continue the conversation. But instead, he lifted his chin and let out a loud laugh into the air as though I had said something amusing. You must be joking. She's where she needs to be. And if Oscar isn't careful, he'll end up the same way, Samuel said in a matter-of-fact tone. Anyway, it was nice to meet you. The acquisitions team, you say? Maybe I'll see you around. He patted me on the shoulder and walked away, leaving me standing on my own once again. The smartly dressed young waitresses began walking around with silver trays full of hors d'oeuvres, offering them to anyone along their route. A young and petite, pretty brown-haired girl with the warmest of complexions started to head in my direction until she stopped just in front of me. Would you care to take one? She asked. The miniature menu card on the tray read, rosemary polenta bites with pepperonata, truffle arancini balls, and sticky shallot, fig, and almond phyllo parcels. I glanced at the selection before making my choice and delicately placed the food in my mouth, savouring its exquisite taste. I held up my hand, signaling to the waitress that I had finished, but she still stood there smiling rather than moving on to the next group of people. She nodded towards the tray. Oh no, I'm all good, thank you. Lovely, but I couldn't possibly eat any more. I apologised. Madam, the menu is for you. She nodded again as both her hands were carefully holding the tray. No, honestly, I really couldn't. Before I had a chance to finish, she moved a little closer to me and winked before whispering, the menu, madam. You really need to pick it up and read the other side. She extended the tray up so that I could pick it up as smoothly as possible. I was confused, but did as she prompted. Picking up the card and flipping it over as normally as I could, I found a handwritten message on the reverse. Meet me in the car park at 15:15 hours behind the third tree. Come alone. I quickly looked up and around the room, hoping that someone was looking at me, waiting for me to read it and give me the signal, but no one was. Who wrote this? I asked the waitress. I don't know, she replied quietly. My manager gave me the card, pointed to you in the hall, and told me to hand it to you, but without anyone seeing. I'm just doing as I'm told to. She turned to find him, but something seemed to catch her attention, and she looked nervous. I must go. Okay, thank you, I replied, nodding my head in appreciation. She smiled and quickly walked away. I tried to see where she went, but she disappeared into one of the doors and was gone. Raising my arm to read the time on my watch, it was already 15:10. I needed to make my way back to the car park and meet my mystery message writer. Making my apologies through the small gathering of people and out of the main entrance, I started back to the car park, saying the words over and over in my head as I went. Behind the third tree, come alone. Who is it? Who wants to see me? I was half expecting it to be Oscar, but why would he want to speak to me? I counted the large trees as I approached the row of them. 1, 2, 3. That one. I headed in that direction and slowed down to look all around me. Was anyone else in the car park? No, I was alone. Completely alone. I didn't feel safe, not one little bit. My heart was pounding in my chest and the wind was swirling around me, blowing my hair into my face. As I reached the gap in the trees, I ducked under one of the lower branches and once again looked all around. I couldn't see anyone. Maybe it was because I was a few minutes early. Maybe the note wasn't for me after all. Suddenly, there she was as if out of nowhere, appearing from behind the tree next to me. Esmeralda, we meet at last, she said, walking towards me and holding out a petite hand to shake mine. It was cold, but soft and tanned. She had a healthy glow about her. Sarah Richardson, thanks for coming today, Esmeralda. You're welcome, I replied. How did you... I had so many questions, but she cut me off instantly. I must be quick. If anyone sees the two of us talking, it will blow our cover. I take it you have met Oscar and Emily? She asked, tilting her head to one side. Yes, I... Great, then you've met the man himself. Her gentle eyes seemed to narrow before continuing. As I said in our conversation, my father died suddenly last year from kidney failure. The majority shareholding of the family business was left to my brother, Michael, who apparently hung himself at home and was found by Oscar in the early hours of the morning 3 weeks ago. What do you mean, apparently? I challenged her. Esmeralda, if there is one thing you should know, it's that Oscar is a spoilt child and always has been. Michael had a real handful with that one growing up. I know that Michael was under pressure as the business was getting on top of him, but not enough for him to end it all. I wouldn't be surprised if, well, let's just say I think there is a foul play involved in Michael's death. I don't know exactly what, and more to the point, I believe there is still more going on. That's why I need your help. Sarah clutched at my sleeve as if it was her last lifeline. This case fascinated me, but I had very little to go on, other than the fact that Assissa had a hunch that her nephew was involved in the death of her brother. That's why I'm paying you £1 million to figure out this whole mess, Esmeralda. I can't go to the police as they aren't interested, and I can't afford for this to be in the public domain, since it will devalue the shares of the business. As promised, I will transfer 50% now and 50% when you can unravel the truth. There was a rustle in the trees as if someone was there and listening to us. It startled both of us as we stepped back, our bodies against the tree trunk in silence, watching, waiting, and listening. No one in the family knows I'm working this case, right? I whispered gently to her. No, and no one must know. They will block us both out and we will never get to the truth. For the sake of my father, who will be turning in his grave if he knew, I need to get to the answers and without the media finding out. She held up her hand and placed it softly on my shoulder, her voice faint. How can I get in contact with you? I asked. I'll be in touch. She handed me a white business card. No name, no address, just an international telephone number. There it was again, the rustling in the trees. I held my breath, expecting someone to confront me, but as I was about to speak, a small bird came hopping out of the undergrowth, clutching at a stick in its beak. Turning towards Sarah and almost laughing with relief, I found that she had gone, vanished into almost thin air. I was standing below the trees in the car park, completely on my own. Letting out a big, deep breath, I threw my head backwards, resting it on the rough bark behind me, and contemplated for a second. What was I getting myself into?